Well, I'd say it's been a while since we talked about this topic, hasn't it? It still feels like yesterday that Alison Pregler and the rest of the former Channel Awesome staff helped to expose Mike Machad, Brad Jones, and the Walker brothers for the scum that they are. I guess Larry Bundy Jr. really is the last man standing. I know it doesn't seem like that long ago, but it really has been over a year since the whole Change the Channel movement. But I think the fact that it's still being talked about really resonates the impact that it made. To make a long story short, back in April 2018, a 72-page document was released exposing a lot, and I do mean a lot, of disgusting information about the company. At first it wasn't too big, but eventually it started to get a huge following, with a lot of people closely associated with the company explaining the problems going on behind the scenes. From scamming people out of their money, to not providing food and water for people working on their projects, to failing to provide a safe work environment for the other producers, to wrongfully firing someone after they got out of surgery, there's actually quite a lot to cover that would require its own video. And as a response to this little matter, Channel Awesome in their infinite wisdom decided to put out a half-ass non-apology, a half-ass response accusing people behind the document as blatant liars, and through their own incompetence indirectly revealed that Juario was a sex offender and a rapist.
Ooh.
They made no attempt to apologize to the people they fucked over, including Juario's victims, stayed silent, swept it under the rug, moved on like nothing ever happened, and proceeded to mass block people on Twitter in a desperate attempt at damage control. To say that people were upset about this would be putting it very lightly, and I'll admit, I was one of those people who was very vocal about it at the time. Initially, I was only planning to do a response to the Jungle Book 2016 episode, where he utterly fails to comprehend the movie in even the most basic ways. One major gripe that I had with the episode in particular is how he fancied the idea that it was trying to be a dark and gritty adult version of the animated movie, in spite of the very obvious fact that it was meant to be seen and understood by children. Of course, when the Change the Channel movement came out and they utterly refused to address the problems, I felt compelled to talk about them again, breaking down the Deadpool 2 episode detailing the absolute clusterfuck that was their way of distracting people from the document. A lot of people have been saying that we should just get over it because it's old news or it's not relevant anymore. How it was just another hate trend that would outlast its welcome after a few weeks. Even though it's still being talked about and people are still mocking them for it on Twitter. Which is pretty much the equivalent of saying we should just forget all about the sex crimes Bill Cosby committed and allow him to start a new season of his show on Netflix. You see, it doesn't actually matter how long ago the movement was. The reason why it was done in the first place is still the fact of the matter. The company is still being run by morally reprehensible people who don't deserve their audience. They showed no remorse, regret, or contrition for the crimes they committed, and just did a bunch of finger-pointing and victim-blaming while being coddled by whatever idiots are still supporting them after that utter disaster. So as long as they continue to be absolute scumbags about years of abuse and lies while putting out shitty content, they're entitled to whatever criticism they receive. Which brings us to the subject of today's video. Considered to be an oldie but a goodie, the Sailor Moon episode of the Nostalgia Critic, originally uploaded in 2013, is a very, very special kinda bad. Trust me folks, we're in for a fun one today. The dozens of ways in which this episode fails is simply magical. It is literally so bad that it is, with no exaggeration, even worse than the other two. And I know what you might be thinking. This was an episode made in 2013, when the show appeared to have a better sense of control over itself. It's not a clipless review, so there's less cringe-inducing sketches along the way. And it was also done during a time when the sketches weren't so excessive. And even beyond that, getting information wrong on something and not bringing any nuance to a review is fairly common in Nostalgia Critic these days. And this was made long before the Change the Channel movement, so we didn't make this episode as a distraction from any elephants in the room. What could possibly make it worse than the Jungle Book and Deadpool 2? Well, let's start by bringing up a little Easter egg. At some point in time, Doug got the brilliant idea to nickname Sailor Moon Jailbait the Show. At a convention. In front of hundreds of people. What does this have to do with anything, you might ask? Well, I want you to keep that piece of information in mind because this really plays a role in understanding why the episode is just so disgusting.
And here we go.
The episode starts with a sketch where Doug and a mad scientist are trying to concoct a formula for a show that'll give them riches. He does this while listing a bunch of stereotypical summaries of other shows, one of them happening to be Power Rangers.
Mighty Morphin Power Rangers!
Land Teens fight Petty Patrol, then Monster, and Giant Robot.
And considering that Sailor Moon was actually based on that same formula, you'd think that what ends up happening next would be less asinine.
Get ready to jot down my latest formula.
You got it?
Yes, and it's going to make us millions.
Well, that's wonderful! Let's hear it!
14-year-old girl acts stupid, uses magical powers to look slutty and stupid, talking cat tells her how to fight crime because she's so stupid, surrounds herself with smarter girls that make her look even more stupid.
So according to Doug, Sailor Moon is just a bunch of 14-year-old girls using magic powers while looking slutty, which is absolutely nothing like what the show actually is. And aside from this just being a horrible summary of the show, this opening sketch acts as a frame for the comedy of the rest of the episode. Sailor Moon is stupid and slutty. Did you think that was funny? Because we got 20 more minutes of this shit. So after taking a jab at Full House, Doug proceeds to do a brief overview of the show's popularity and then dives into the review. And only 40 seconds in, we already come across a huge red flag.
I guess the only downside is the obvious American additions, like this pointless Star Wars style scroll. Yeah, because that's what girls watching this show are really into. Star Wars! They go so hand in hand, I'm surprised Lucas didn't release a more feminine version with Serena doing Darth Vader.
Oh, fuck you, Doug. Fuck you. This is the kind of shit I expect to see from Kathleen Kennedy. He is seriously jumping to the conclusion that Star Wars is not something that can be enjoyed by girls. Why? Because there's only one primary female character in the original trilogy? I don't care how you slice it, that's straight up sexist. How the hell did he even come to this conclusion? Star Wars was made for a general audience. There were women and girls who watched it before The Force Awakens. And he's saying this after he just acknowledged that Sailor Moon has fans of both genders. One of the cosplayers he shows in the opening screen cap is literally a boy. And before you reach for the "it's just a joke" or the "it's comedy" excuse, that doesn't make it okay. It was terribly translated in a very careless manner. And this joke is a reflection of what Doug actually thinks of the show. How do I know this? Because it's literally a running theme behind the scenes. If you were to look at the commentary and behind the scenes of several episodes, like the Real Thoughts and First Viewing videos, a lot of the jokes that Doug puts into the final cut of a Nostalgia Critic episode are entirely based on his initial viewings of the thing in question.
Sherman from Peabody and Sherman had a sex change. So young.
Did you have a feeling? I had a feeling. I don't know. Samvira comes home to her daughter, who is presumably Sherman, after he got a sex change. Which, let's be honest, we all saw that coming.
Again, it's like the movement of this guy could be funny. It's like they're onto something, but they're not talented.
His career is on the rise. Let's see if we can put a stop to that by casting him as someone who's supposed to move funny, but instead moves like a sped-up inflatable outside of a car rental.
He thought of the joke, wrote it into the script, acted it out, edited it, and allowed it to appear in the final version. So what am I supposed to take from this other than he deliberately said something stupid and insensitive just because he thought it would be funny? And what else do you think he could be saying here? If girls can't like Star Wars, does this also mean that girls can't like Transformers? Can girls not like G.I. Joe? Can girls not like Johnny Quest? Can girls not like Ninja Turtles? Can girls not like Batman? Can girls not like Ninja Turtles teaming up with Batman? Can girls not like Mortal Kombat? And this is something that can also be taken both ways. Can boys not like My Little Pony, Gem, The Winx Club, Totally Spies, as told by Ginger? If that's the case, I would be in therapy right now. I know it seems like I'm making a big deal out of the first joke of this review, but it's a gateway to a huge problem with this episode. It is absurdly misogynistic. You thought I was just making a backhanded comment in my Deadpool 2 response? No, it's a reoccurring problem throughout the video. Don't believe me? Well, we're just getting started. He proceeds to briefly go over the prologue, followed by an Avatar reference that's neither funny or needed, and he reacts to the setup of the main plot.
Although her world was destroyed, Queen Serenity's last hope was the power of the Empyrean Silver Crystal and the Crescent Moon Wand.
Only this crystalline wand can combat the power of the Negaforce.
Yeah, look, show, even if you pretend you have a story that matters beyond people who see a high-class meal as a flamin' Hot Pocket, you still had to follow up all that supposed epicness with this.
Ah! Oh no, I'm late for school again!
Yeah, I bet you thought this was going to be a big space opera with action, drama, and exotic locations. But nope, it's just your common English-speaking town that has everything in Japanese for some reason.
This is actually why the story has an importance to it. It may come across as off-tonish, but it's necessary for establishing the setting. The idea of Sailor Moon was taking the Greek legend of Selene and Endymion and having it take place in a modern setting. I can sort of understand Doug not knowing this since I don't expect him to be an expert in Greek mythology, but it still serves as one of the many examples for how not good his research was on this show. Yeah, it's another reoccurring problem that becomes very apparent as we move forward.
She's just your everyday gigantic-eyed blonde Japanese girl who constantly keeps flunking her exams.
Oh, chill out, Serena. It's just one lousy test. It's not like it's the end of the world or something.
You don't understand. I'm Japanese. To me, failure is everything.
Oh gee, a Japanese kid who thinks grades are everything because she's Japanese. That's a lazy stereotype and you know it.
Being pretty as sin and dumb as cheese, she of course is very popular in school, obtaining all sorts of friends.
Actually, Serena was anything but popular. Outside of a few friends, she has a hard time getting along with other students as well as the teachers. Oh, but according to Doug, she must be popular because she's pretty as sin and dumb as cheese. Remember, kids, Sailor Moon is slutty and stupid.
Like an over-the-top accent with a human attached to it.
Actually, if you look into it, Molly's heavily Brooklyn accent is a reference to her Japanese actress also having a heavy accent. And the next couple of minutes is just snarky comments that aren't clever or funny, so they're not really worth mentioning. Now, this just might be a me problem, but this is another issue with the episode. The pacing is too slow. Currently, we're 7 minutes into the episode, but it feels like it's been 12 because of all the unwitty comments and cutaway jokes. And so far, he hasn't given any interesting information about Sailor Moon. All we've gotten so far is a boring sketch, a very sexist remark, and a couple of quibbles where he didn't pay attention to the episode or do any research on the show. I get that he's going scene by scene of the pilot, but there's a lot of better ways you can do it.
By the way, here's a confusing scene. We see her walk by a poster of a young girl dressed exactly how she is dressed. Like it's from a movie or a show or something.
I wish I could be like Sailor V. She's so beautiful and smart. Something exciting's always happening in her life, not like mine.
So, what? A movie or TV industry got wind of this idea that coincidentally is exactly the same as what's going on right now? Does that mean that something like Transformers is a true story then?
Alright, I know I've been putting this on pause a lot, but here's another problem. Doug is going on this confusing exposition on what Sailor V is supposed to be. We even see Serena bring her up a few times. But it's clearly Sailor Venus, one of the Sailor Scouts. Why is this an issue? Because later in the episode, Doug talks about how the disguises don't work on the Sailor Scouts. So he's complaining about the disguises being obvious, but he's unable to recognize Sailor V himself. It's really not that hard to figure out. It's actually pretty common knowledge if you've seen the opening, to the point that you don't even have to read the prequel manga. All you have to do is remove the mask and boom, it's Mina wearing one of the Sailor Scout uniforms. How does Doug not see this? The picture is literally right in front of him. He just finished talking about the opening sequence and he doesn't even see a resemblance between Venus and Mina? This is a mistake that a child could have avoided making. How exactly did Doug even miss this? He clearly had to have been involved in the episode's editing. He was practically given dozens of chances to recognize how Sailor V is Mina and he just blew every single one of them. Look, Doug, I know that expecting you to be competent at this kind of thing is wishful thinking at this point, but maybe if you paid more attention to the episode that you said that you watched, which I'm really starting to doubt at this point, you would have been able to answer your own question. Maybe you're just too blind as a bat to even notice. So after that, we get to the scene where Serena learns how to use her powers after talking with Luna.
No, not that one.
Doug begins to comment on it, and try to bear with me, folks, because this is where things get really fucking creepy.
And of course, the miniskirt. The mini skirt. Yep, the costume choice that in no way enables her to fight better, but sure does force her to squat a lot. Okay, so take out the fact that's obviously in no way battle armor. Take out the fact that's obviously fan service. Take out the fact that just like He-Man, somehow removing more clothes bizarrely disguises them. Though to be fair with both these outfits, is the face really the first thing you're going to be looking at? Take all that away and just tell yourself, this obviously sexualized transformation that takes up a solid minute in each episode happens to a 14-year-old girl. Yeah, forgot that for a second, didn't you? The girls in this show are, and always have been, 14 years old. 14 years old. 14 years old. 14, damn! Years old.
Okay, that right there, that was messed up.
Oh my fucking Lord! There is literally so much wrong with this couple of seconds that I could write a book about it. First of all, the transformation scenes are not fan service. Like, at all. There's no jiggling boobs or perverted gleams in these transformations. The focus is put on the outfits and accessories the Sailor Scouts wear for battle. Their movements don't even imply any sort of fan service. They're graceful poses and well-choreographed movements that emphasize how they're getting ready to kick some butt. The sound design fits the visual aesthetic, the music has a good beat to it, and the art style is smooth and really elegant. That's not sexualized, that's fucking badass. Doug seems to think that these transformation scenes are just perverted strip teasing, because yeah, putting on clothes is definitely what counts as strip teasing. The Twilight movies had more strip teasing. Second, what the hell is wrong with you? You clearly stated that these characters are 14 years old, and you're still funning over how attractive they look in these transformations. How has this been up for almost 6 years, and no one has ever bothered to bring it up? Were you people really that distracted by his utterly unfunny jokes and utterly unintelligent reviews for so long that a brony in 2019 had to be the one to bring this up? And don't even think about giving me that it was a joke bullcrap, because this directly ties into his top 11 sexiest animated women video. He literally brings it up in the episode itself. And then it's followed by him trying to explain how he not only didn't know how Serena was 14 years old, but because he didn't know how old she was, that makes it okay.
But, of course, all this talk about Sailor Moon being a sexy 14-year-old pinup is all building up to one important question. Given this information, why did I still put her in the top 11 hottest anime women list? I didn't know! I swear I didn't know! I mean, look at the way they're drawn, man! I thought they were in college or at the very least late high school. Wouldn't you have made that guess? Come on, look at the way they're showing them off!
You really are that stupid, aren't you? You can't just say that you didn't know how old she was and use that as an excuse. That's not how it works, you fucking idiot! And for that matter, you seriously couldn't tell that Serena was a teenager? For the love of God, I was a dumb little kid when this show came out, and even I could tell she was a teenager. How you came to the conclusion that she was a woman is a mystery to me. Are you seriously telling us that you can recognize a girl's sexual history or age just by looking at them? You can't! You can't! That's like telling people you can recognize someone's ethnicity or race just by looking at them. It doesn't work!
Wouldn't you have made that guess? Come on, look at the way they're showing them off! I swear, officer! I mean audience!
Did he really just say that? No. He couldn't have. He really couldn't have. He did not just say that!
I swear, officer! I mean audience! 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 I had no idea their real age!
What the fuck is wrong with you, dude?
Okay, that's it. This is where I draw the line. Remember that stuff I said at the beginning? How he called Sailor Moon jailbait the show at a convention? How a lot of the jokes he makes in his reviews are based on how he sees the movie or the show in real life? Because that's literally how Doug Walker sees Sailor Moon. He sees it as jailbait. Did he seriously not take a moment to think about how people would see that? Did he really not see this as a problem? Did he simply not understand how this would look really, really bad on his end? He just made a bunch of snarky remarks about how he thought Sailor Moon was sexually attractive without knowing how old she was, then proceeds to make jokes about finding them attractive in this episode anyway, even calling the show jailbait after he did this review, and just didn't care at all about how gross it actually was.
14-year-old girl acts stupid, uses magical powers to look slutty and stupid.
40... Damn! Years old. I swear, officer! I mean audience! I had no idea their real age.
All units, we have a code red. Code red. Come on, boys, follow me. Cavalry,
Do not attempt to move or we'll be shooting ourselves.
Walker, you are such a fucking creep!
Ow! Keep it together, man!
Okay. For the sake of my sanity, let's forget about the whole 14 years old thing and rewind a couple of moments back. So, what else is there to talk about?
Now, before any of you find this incredibly creepy, let me make one thing perfectly clear. The age of consent in many parts of Japan is, in fact, 13 years old. Now you may find it incredibly creepy.
Oh, no. Yeah, if you thought this episode wasn't problematic before, then you're in for a serious wake-up call. This is where Doug proceeds to talk about consent laws in Japan and sexuality in general, and it comes across as really out of left field. Aside from just being not needed at all, it takes up a good chunk of the review just to show how little Doug knows about what he's actually talking about. And while I am aware that Japan does have problems with this kind of stuff, what makes you think Doug has any better knowledge about it? And aside from that, why would anyone even want to see that? Seriously, going to an episode of Nostalgia Critic to learn about sex is like going to Quentin Reviews for political commentary. It's unwarranted, uncomfortable, and it just comes right the hell out of nowhere. But let's try breaking it down into more detail. Firstly, he says that the transformations look slutty just because they have miniskirts and they show off their legs. Because according to Doug, no woman or girl in the history of the human race has ever worn a miniskirt or something that makes their legs visible. What about these pictures of ballerina dancers and figure skaters? What about these pictures of Katana and Melina from Mortal Kombat? Are they supposed to be dressing as slutty just because they have miniskirts or wearing something that shows their legs? Just because something comes across as revealing doesn't automatically make it slutty. It's called context, which is something that he didn't take into account with these transformation scenes. He also mentions how the sexualization of girls in media doesn't teach people about sex and is only doing it to exploit it for profit. But there's a problem with that. Doug just said that looking like this, or this, regardless of the context behind it, automatically makes you look slutty, which is just painfully sexist in every way that you look at it. He's making an extremely broad assumption based solely on looks without any actual first-hand knowledge on the subject. It's like he's blaming the girls for looking slutty instead of himself for taking it as slutty without said context. It's not my fault I think Sailor Moon looks slutty. She's wearing a miniskirt and revealing her legs. I mean, what else am I supposed to take away from the scene where he's being turned on by the transformations and the ramble about how he didn't know she was 14? He's just reinforcing the belief that it's Sailor Moon's fault that he didn't bother to look up basic information on the character. Then it gets worse when he not only blames Sailor Moon, but also starts talking about how we should be blaming Japan for his fuck-up. You see, Japan is the creepy one because their age of consent is 13. They're the ones to blame for Doug calling a 14-year-old slutty and thinking the transformation scenes are fan service strip teasing. Which is strange because throughout this whole ramble, Doug doesn't seem to take America's consent laws into account. While it's true that the US consent law is higher at 16 years old, they still have the same close-in-age exception as Japan. And while Japan does have a club where you can pay to grope women dressed in school outfits and business sets, you can literally do the same thing in America and just hope the woman doesn't come after you. It's called roleplay. Also, there's this bit.
Sex between 13 to 17-year-olds can only be done with other 13 to 17-year-olds.
That's good.
However, that's only sex. Groping, handjobs, blowjobs, and whatever else your preferred imagination can come up with is all perfectly legal.
That's bad.
Did Doug Walker, a man in his 30s, really just say that handjobs and blowjobs are outside of sex? I really don't need to explain what's wrong with that, do I? Ah, fuck it, I'm gonna do it anyway. Blowjobs are a form of oral sex. Just because it's not vaginal doesn't mean it's not explicit. And the same thing goes for handjobs. It doesn't matter where it is, the penis is still being stroked by something. How do you not get this? Did you just not take a sex ed class? You don't even need a sex ed class to know that blowjobs and handjobs are explicit forms of sex. This man is literally so goddamn stupid that he thinks oral sex doesn't count as sex. This asswipe has 1 million subscribers and I don't. So following the ramble on Japan's sex laws and the dreaded I didn't know she was 14, good God, why is any member of my species still supporting this idiot after that? We get a sketch about Doug remembering his younger self and his experiences with Sailor Moon. And I want to let you guys know right now that this is by far one of the worst sketches in the entire series. It's right up there with the Adam Sandler phone call and the Real Chipmunks movie musical number, as well as the horribly drawn out Where is the Proof parody from Final Fantasy The Spirit Within, where he also happens to make a joke about Notre Dame burning down only a few weeks after the tragedy. Seriously, does this shit stain even follow his own advice? And it's also another example of his sexist behavior in this episode.
And on behalf of the moon, I will punish you.
Oh my God, this is awful.
Turn that back on.
Who said that?
I did.
Penis?
Yeah.
You can talk?
All penises talk around this age. It's the greatest secret no woman knows about, but wouldn't be the least bit shocked to discover.
Alright, to quote Doug himself,
What the fuck am I looking at?
Well, despite what a terrifying discovery this is, I'm still not gonna watch this show.
It doesn't matter what you think. From now on, I'll be calling all the shots. You're gonna see everything in a whole new light.
Okay, I am currently questioning every decision I've ever made in my life leading to this moment. Can someone just kill me, please? I know I still have a lot to live for, but I don't want to live with the knowledge that I had to sit through Doug waving his junk at a camera 3 inches away from my face.
What are you talking about?
Look at that show again. Looks damn good now, doesn't it?
Wow. There's more to this show than I thought.
Oh yeah.
My eyes! The pain!
No! I'm a mentally capable male! I won't let my penis call all my decisions for me!
Turn that back on, or I'll shoot where the sun always shines.
Okay, when did this turn into South Park? So what I'm getting from this is that Doug is being held hostage by his dick to watch Sailor Moon for its non-existent sex appeal. Because it's still not his fault that he saw Sailor Moon as slutty. I shouldn't have to tell anyone this, but your penis does not make you do stuff. Sexual urges do not have the ability to hold you hostage to them. This might just be seen as Doug making a really shitty joke, but a fairly big part of society has somehow trained itself to believe that. You know all those commercials, movies, and TV shows that seem to have this aggressive portrayal of the stereotype that men only think about sex and want sex from a woman?
I wonder how much money he makes. I wonder if he loves his mother. I wonder if he'll lose his hair. I wonder if he wants kids. I wonder if he's the one.
I want to sleep with her, 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 I want to sleep with her. I want her Pepsi Max, I want her Pepsi Max, I want her Pepsi Max.
Not a chance.
Dang! Wait, for which one?
Because that's exactly what Doug is doing here. Men are perverts and only think about getting laid. Men think about sex a lot and it's the primary thing on their mind. Men are perverts who can control their sexual side. It is such a stupid stereotype that has long since overstayed its welcome. It probably started as a joke on some sitcom somewhere, but it has long since stopped being funny. And the fact that Doug is applying that stereotype to Sailor Moon makes it even worse. He's making the assumption that any guy who ever watched this show only ever watched it for its supposed fan service. Something that Doug clearly doesn't seem to understand is that the show wasn't made for teenagers. It was made to be family friendly. And he doesn't consider that people didn't watch it for its sex appeal, but, and I'm just thinking out loud here, watched it for its characters and the story. And the sketch also plays into another stereotypical problem. Given the way he portrays himself and the way that he only thinks Sailor Moon is sexy when she's transforming, he's feeding into the belief that while men are sex crazed no matter how they're dressed, sexuality in women only exists when they're quote-unquote wearing something sexy. Remember the earlier image where he showed real 14-year-old girls alongside the Sailor Moon transformation? He was clearly doing it to show how real 14-year-old girls aren't sexualized in the way he thinks Sailor Moon was. But Sailor Moon was never being sexualized at any point. So not only does this comparison have no purpose, but it further feeds the sexist idea that because Sailor Moon's outfit looks the way that it does, it must be slutty or fan service. I really don't know why Doug thought this whole 5-minute segment was a good idea, but it really seems to capture the mindset that he made when making this episode. Slut-shaming, sexism, encouraging the idea that men are perverts who can control their sexual urges, so not only is he being sexist towards women, but men as well. Oh my god, he's Kathleen Kennedy 2.0. Mild racism towards Japan, and of course, getting information wrong for the sake of a joke because he thinks comedy is more important. Alright, I've spent more than enough time on this 5-minute segment and I just want to move forward.
So Serena seems shocked that she can now suddenly transform.
This dream is getting weirder and weirder. I'll never study that hard again.
Though weirdly enough, doesn't look the least bit shocked while she's transforming. In fact, I bet she'll keep this exact same calm state every single time she changes.
Well, of course she's not gonna be surprised the second time she transforms. She already knows what's coming, so it's not gonna catch her off guard.
Speaking of which, there actually is a villain in this series, known as Queen Beryl. Yes, because no name is more terrifying than a wooden container that can bring me alcohol. Actually, you sure she's not the hero?
Beryl is named after a mineral of the same name. It's a type of gemstone that has several varieties like emerald and aquamarine. And it fits because some of the lore of Sailor Moon involves certain types of gemstones. In fact, a lot of the villains are named after gemstones and metals because the author of the series, Naoko Takeuchi, majored in chemistry in college. How did you mistake that for a container of alcohol? They're not even spelled the same. Oh, and did I mention that Kyoko Takayuchi is a woman? You know, the sex that you practically spent the last 5 minutes mocking, and not a man who was trying to exploit sex for profit? How's those sexism jokes going for you now? You really didn't bother to do any research on this series, did you?
She uses her evil minion named Jedite. Too obvious.
Yep, I'm convinced. You didn't bother to do any research on Sailor Moon because if you did, you know that Jedite is named after a gemstone like Beryl is. They weren't just taking stuff from Star Wars to ride on its popularity. And after that horrible Girls Can't Like Star Wars comment you made earlier, I'm pretty sure you have no place to talk about Star Wars. You incompetent moron! Look, I'm not expecting Doug to be an expert on Sailor Moon, or anything else he talks about on this show, or really anything he talks about in general, but I'm at least expecting the bare minimum here. Doug should be expected to put more thought, effort, and research into this kind of stuff before putting it out. Because like it or not, that's what a reviewer is supposed to do. It doesn't matter how you advertise the tone of your review show, as a comedy, satire, or otherwise. You're still expected to give a proper outlook on the subject in question. The purpose of any review is to give an informative analysis on a given work, be it a movie, TV show, episode of a TV show, video game, comic book, or whatever you want to call it. People go to a review because they want an idea of the thing that's being discussed in the video, and you're expected to give a reasonable impression of the thing being discussed. No matter what, you need to correctly inform the audience about the qualities of the property, and if you can't do that, you fail to put out a good review. And this is the primary problem with the Sailor Moon episode. Even without the cringe-inducing sketches, even without the scenes where he misogynistically thinks the transformation scenes are strip-teasing fan service, even without the scene where he tries to defend himself for not knowing how old Serena was, we are halfway into this review and Doug has said absolutely nothing informative, insightful, or educational about Sailor Moon. All he's done is repeatedly get details wrong, put together disgusting jokes with extremely ugly double standards behind them, and wave his junk in front of a camera. I said it before and I'll say it again. If you want your show to be a comedic sketch series, don't advertise it as a review series. Because all you're doing is showing the audience that you care less about informing them about the qualities of a given work, and more about desperately trying to make them laugh at whatever random garbage comes spewing out of your mouth. Because of the priorities being put in making stupid jokes and sketches, Doug doesn't seem to care at all about informing his audience about what people liked about Sailor Moon, which is most likely the reason he gets so many details wrong. And with something with a following as widely spread as Sailor Moon, you can't afford to make this many mistakes. Once or twice is understandable, but when you're doing it for the entire video, it's a pretty good way to turn people away from your content. All you're doing is showing them how little you actually know about the subject, and giving them so many reasons to not take you seriously. This isn't even nitpicking anymore. These are very legitimate problems that are made severely obvious throughout the episode. This entire video feels like the equivalent of a kid being told to do a history report on Theodore Roosevelt. But they didn't bother to do any research on him and just told a story about how he was a pirate, and was black. In fact, why did people even bother to watch Doug's piss-poor review of the series again after it was re-uploaded 3 years ago? Kaluna Reviews did her retrospective on the series around the same time, and she clearly has more knowledge on Sailor Moon than either me or Doug could ever even hope to. Did they really think those disgusting jokes about Doug being turned on by 14-year-old stripteases and not knowing how old Serena was, and waving his dick in people's faces while portraying men as sex hounds were so ingenious and inspired that they needed to see them again?
40 damn! Years old. I swear, officer, I mean audience, I had no idea their real age.
Wow, there's more to this show than I thought.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, he does some more talking about the main plot and eventually comments on Serena running away from danger.
But once Luna reminds Serena to use her brain, she goes through her petalicious transformation and is ready to kick ass. Or cowers in the corner like a fucking scaredy cat.
Need I remind you that this is the first season of the show? Of course she's going to be scared. The whole fighting evil monsters and alien things is still new to her. And didn't you just finish ranting about how she was 14? Did you really expect her to be 100% fearless against this kind of stuff? Also, portraying Serena as just a coward undermines her character development over time, and several of her defining moments, like when she fought Rubius to protect her daughter, or when she fought against the Sailor Animes to rescue Darien despite going through an emotional crisis.
Well, it'll probably surprise no one that Sailor Moon actually does very little physical fighting in this show. Which is no big shock if she even raises her knee a centimeter to kick, she exposes her goodies to the world. Which in many parts of Japan, of course, is no big problem anyway.
I already talked about why this is a gross double standard, so I'm just gonna go back to what I said earlier.
Most of the fight scenes require her being trapped or stuck in something for probably longer than is needed.
Again, this is the first season. This is still new to her, and she's still gaining experience.
This is Tuxedo Mask, and yes, it is painfully obvious who it really is. But please don't tell Serena, she's not very bright.
Okay, what the fuck? If it was really that easy for you to figure out who Tuxedo Mask is, why couldn't you do the same thing for Sailor V? She was in the opening sequence, and she was in the picture you used in the intro. This guy's ability to decipher disguises must be on par with Ash Ketchum.
The magic tiara isn't her only enchanted device, though. She also has a pen that can change her into anything. Wait, what?
It's a very powerful transforming tool. It turns you into whatever you want.
Well, then what the fuck is she using that tiara for? I mean, they didn't give any limitations or anything. They said she can change into fucking anything she wants. Hey, why doesn't she just turn around and be like,
take on the form of Godzilla?
Series over! 6 seasons spared!
This was actually the fault of bad translation, because in the original Japanese version it's called a disguise pen. It doesn't just transform her into literally anything. It was only ever used for disguises to keep herself hidden to better complete missions. I can kind of understand making this mistake just going by the Deke dub, but here's the thing. For the grand majority of the review, Doug only ever seems to go exclusively by the Deke dub, without any consideration for the Japanese version. You still have to take into account that this is an American dub of a Japanese cartoon. And mistranslations are actually pretty common. Not too long ago it was revealed that Xehanort's actual plan wasn't to create a world of pure light, but to restart the universe because he thought the current one was too broken to fix. This is an example of how because Doug goes primarily by the Deke dub without enough context from the Japanese version, he doesn't get all the details. And even if she took the form of Godzilla, I'm pretty sure that the main villain would have some kind of dark magic to blow her up. Making her bigger would make her an easier target.
But nope, she uses it just to don disguises. Which really aren't necessary, seeing how all you have to do is throw on a bathing suit and a napkin over your crotch, and apparently nobody will recognize you.
Again, that's a lot coming from someone who couldn't bother to recognize Sailor V.
The other reincarnations of the Scouts are found over time, usually in the exact same city and often even the exact same school.
But Serena doesn't find them at the same school. While it's true that the rest of the Sailor Scouts are in the same city, Amy was the only one who was attending the same school as her. The other Scouts are more scattered around, and in very different locations. Hell, Sailor Jupiter didn't even move into the city until episode 25. Seriously, these are mistakes that Doug could have avoided making by just looking at the screen. But it doesn't even feel like he watched the episodes and just assumed that the rest of the team was found at the same school because they have similar looking uniforms.
So, maybe Jedi should try his evil plans in another part of town. I mean, it's not like the Power Rangers that can beam anywhere. All this show does is glorify how lazy Serena is. Serena, a monster is attacking Tokyo!
How far away is that?
About 10 miles.
It's just Tokyo.
But usually...
Okay, first of all, you show no instances of Serena being lazy. All you did was show one clip of her going to bed. And from the looks of this scene, it's nighttime. So of course she's gonna go to bed in her pajamas. Second, this joke doesn't even make any sense. Serena doesn't need to travel 10 miles to get to Tokyo, she lives there. Did you really care so little that you didn't even bother to learn about the character's location? Lily Orchard does more research than you.
And yes, even the other planets over time joined the group as well. Ooh, except Pluto, you're not a planet anymore, so, yeah.
Alright, aside from Pluto's not a planet anymore being low-hanging fruit for a joke, there's a bit of a loophole in what he's saying here. So apparently Sailor Pluto can't be a scout because it's no longer a planet. But that would have to mean that Serena, the main character, can't be a Sailor Scout, because the moon isn't a planet either.
Actually, things got kind of interesting with her character, seeing how Uranus and Neptune were cousins in the show, but not in the Japanese version. No, in the Japanese version, they were a couple.
So only now, when the review is almost over, does he ever bother to use context from the Japanese version. Well, wait a minute. If he did take time to check the Japanese version, how did he miss they said the pen was for disguises and not shape-shifting powers? Were you seriously just being selective on what kind of research you were doing based on whichever jokes you could come up with for this video? This is what I mean by Doug caring more about comedy than actually reviewing something. He just goes by what he thinks is giving him material for jokes instead of actually informing people about the show. Could you imagine a world where every scientist is replaced with a clown, we'd be sent back to the Stone Age in seconds.
Yeah, kind of funny how we can sex up our 14-year-olds all we want.
Will you stop saying that? How many times do I have to tell you? They were not sexualizing Sailor Moon. It was made to be a family-friendly show, and in several cases was targeted at little girls. What the hell are you trying to tell us, dog? That Kyoko Takeuchi wanted to make a series to teach little girls how to dress up in miniskirts and look slutty? That she was making the transformation scenes for perverted teenage boys? That girls can't like Star Wars? No! I'm not gonna let that go!
So just to check. Okay, shame. Okay, shame.
Oh, so now you're addressing the double standards of America marketing sex after you spent 5 minutes blaming Japan for it. Yeah, this really would have been nice to have a good 12 minutes ago.
Come on, guys, maybe you could have worked it into your half-assed PSAs at the end. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, there's PSAs in this show. Obviously slapped on at the end of each episode using the same animation they used before. Because Lord knows, the show hasn't repeated enough animation already.
Yeah, the PSA was obviously really gimmicky, but you have to point out that it wasn't the show's fault. I guess for whatever reason, the 90s felt like there had to be a PSA at the end of every cartoon. So the Deke dub decided to go that route just to fit into a fad. Though I'm pretty sure that's just on Deke because I don't recall the Japanese version ending with a PSA.
Or in the case of the lesbian duo, maybe they can do something like,
"Hey kids, you got boys and you got girls. Pick one."
Okay, this is getting ridiculous. And I've seen plenty of bullshit up to this point already. You can't just pick what gender you're sexually attracted to. It's something that the individual has to develop naturally over time. That's like telling kids to pick which foods they like without realizing that taste buds develop over time. It's not as offensive as a lot of other stuff that's happened in this episode, but it's still a highlight that he has absolutely no idea what he's talking about.
And guys, that's as far as I got.
Oh, you think? I can't possibly imagine why.
I know there's more characters and more villains, but I specifically wanted to address the repeated formula that got Sailor Moon popular in the US.
You do realize the show's formula changed over time, don't you? In fact, that would actually explain why this review is such shit. He only ever talks about the first couple of episodes and judges the entire series based on that. Why are you making a case for the entire series when you barely saw the first season? That's like if I played God of War for an hour then gave a review of the game based on my extremely limited knowledge of it. I can do it, but that doesn't make it a good idea.
One of the scouts discovers the plan, or falls for it herself. Transformation takes place via reused sexually confusing animation.
What the fuck is wrong with you, dude?
While the Serena character is an annoying airhead, I will give her credit that she does at the very least have a character. It's not one that I like, but at the same time it would have been easy just to make her a pretty face with no personality. But she clearly does have a personality, and goes to big extremes. And they do make her look strange and bizarre just as much as they do make her look pretty half the time. And though yeah, she can be self-centered, she's never really mean per se. And I guess from what I understand, the character does get smarter as the series goes on. Or at the very least braver.
Okay, so you just stated very clearly that all the time you spend talking about how stupid and cowardly she is, and all those jokes you made about how she's stupid and slutty was a complete waste of time. Look, either Serena does have a personality or doesn't have a personality. Pick one. You can't just say at the very end that she does have a personality when throughout this entire video you did nothing to show what kind of personality she has.
As for sexing up a 14-year-old, I think it's weird, but I guess there's always just gonna be cultural differences. And in all honesty, we've let out much worse.
Then what was the point of that ramble you went on about Japan's consent laws?
But the moments where she fights back and saves the day is always shown in a good light. So have fun with your little show, just keep it as far away as you can from me.
And that explains your lack of research. Jesus Christ.
I'm the Nostalgia Critic, I remember. Hello?
Mr. Critic, Dr. Hawk thinks he may have, finished that formula or whatever.
What the fuck is this?
Lead on.
Guys, the episode is over. You can literally stop.
Alright, Critic, I know I messed up with the Sailor Moon formula, but I've come up with a formula that's even better.
Even better? You mean, more successful than Sailor Moon?
Really? We're still doing this shit?
3 times more successful.
Really?
Yes, according to my calculations, this should be the most famous, most profitable formula the world has ever known!
Okay, seriously, why is this still going on? Why are they continuing this mad scientist sketch? It feels like a throwaway joke that was just made for the opening, but now they want to stretch it out at the end just to artificially lengthen the episode's runtime. There is literally no reason for this episode to keep going. The review is over. You failed to give an informative analysis on Sailor Moon. Why are you still here?
This should be the most famous, most profitable formula the world has ever known!
Good God, Dr. Hack! What is it? What is it?
Okay. 3 online performers, 2 male, 1 female, remake movies with the help of a German cameraman and Irish immigrant.
I hate you. I really, really do. This really is one of the absolute worst episodes of the Nostalgia Critic. And to say that about an episode that came out before he started doing those clipless sketches with Jurassic World, it really sets the bar to a new low. I would have said that there are no words to describe how bad it is and that it has to be witnessed, but when you put it in words, it ended up being so much worse than I remember. I don't know how he did it, but somehow Doug managed to have shit coming out of his mouth and was talking out of his ass at the same time. Even if you're not familiar with Sailor Moon, it's clear to anyone with eyes and ears that he didn't bother to do any research on the series in preparation for this episode. So much of this review is focused on how supposedly sexualized it is, and he barely goes into anything else. Even for the first couple of episodes, he was given a decent amount of material to work with. And this was seriously the best that he could come up with. And before anyone tries to say, oh, but he's not experienced in anime, you can't blame him for making a mistake when reviewing anime because he's unfamiliar with the genre. First off, that's not an acceptable excuse. Second, well, why didn't he just make this a collab with one of the other producers? Someone who's actually knowledgeable on Sailor Moon. Bennett the Sage, Jesu Otaku, Swede. Any of the other producers who are more familiar with anime. Hell, even Lindsay Ellis would have watched more than a handful of episodes. He didn't even need to make it a full-fledged crossover. Just have a cameo appearance here and there to explain something when he gets confused. For God's sake, he could have just Googled Sailor Moon or look at the wiki and read a basic facts on the show. Like how it was made by a woman, and not a man who wanted to exploit sex for profit. I wasn't expecting him to watch 200 episodes. I was just expecting him to be a little less clueless. He put virtually no effort into exploring why people liked it, which had very little to do with fighting the monsters. Was it because the characters were interesting, or the interactions between them were believable, or how the story was fun and well written and was turning up something better than a lot of shit that was coming out in America at the time? Whatever it was, it certainly wasn't because of anything sexy, because the show was being made with children in mind. No matter how you look at it, there is literally no excuse for why Doug didn't do any research on the series. Why do I say that? Because he clearly took the time to research Japan's consent laws. Apparently being ignorant about Sailor Moon didn't stop him from doing that just to get out of being held accountable for not knowing how old Serena was. And he even managed to fuck that up. The way he tries to elaborate and educate people on Japan's sex laws to show people how fan service affects people's understanding of sex is just so uncalled for. Especially since he doesn't even bother to talk about how the same things are present in America. He barely brings it up at all as a brief counter-argument for America's sensitivity towards homosexuality at the time. I get that Japan has some problems when it comes to dealing with sex, but Sailor Moon is not one of them. At least 95% of what Doug says in this review comes from a place of ignorance or just flat out not caring. He just bases his views on the most watered down and broken references he could think of. It just further shows how he cared more about trying to be funny than give an informed retrospective on the series. Speaking of which, the comedy is just so painfully awful. Even without the cringy sketches and gross innuendos, so many of the jokes in this episode are based on information that's factually incorrect. Some of them weren't even thought out properly, like the joke he made about how obvious it was who Tuxedo Mask is, despite that he couldn't even recognize Sailor V, and she put less effort into hiding her identity than Tuxedo Mask did. The sense of humor that he goes for is childish, crude, and highly tasteless. And so much of it does revolve around the assumption that the characters and transformations were sexualized. I mean, does he even know that there's a character far younger than Serena who also partakes in these transformation sequences? I simply do not get for the life of me how Doug took any of this for being slutty or sexy or kinky or sexual strip teasing. Sailor Moon was not made to look like a slut at all, and it clearly shows. The designs of the Sailor Scout uniforms are based on basic school uniforms, and the transformations were fairly standard for what you'd expect from an anime of this genre. They were really cool and very well directed, and they were being done to show the Sailor Scouts gearing up for battle. They were never sexualized at any point. And I'm sorry, what the fuck was up with that comment about girls not liking Star Wars, or Doug being turned on by 14-year-old strip teases, or that sickening "I swear officer I didn't know how old she was" joke he made in the middle? Why did he think that any of this was okay? And why did anyone think that this was actually funny for even a second? There is nothing funny about this episode. The jokes have so many ugly implications behind them, and it just feels like Doug is making the same joke throughout the whole video. Sailor Moon is stupid and slutty. That is literally the way he describes the character throughout the entire video. Just fuck this episode. Fuck everything about it. It is just so much worse than how I remember it, and is without a doubt in the top 3 absolute worst episodes of the Nostalgia Critic. From the constantly getting details wrong, to the cringe-inducing sketches, to his miserably failed attempt to educate people on sex, to his clearly sexist views on the series, to his insulting portrayal of males having uncontrollable sex urges, to his creepy-ass jokes about finding the Sailor Scouts and their transformation sexually arousing, and how he tried to excuse himself for not knowing how old Serena was, then calling it Jailbait the Show at a convention. I wish there was a way I could burn this fucking episode from my memory. How is anyone still taking anything this absolute fucking moron ever said or is still saying seriously after that? This episode just violates so many defined rules for acceptable content. It's bad enough that he decided to talk about Sailor Moon despite knowing nothing about it, but to do so in such a gross and insulting manner is just unacceptable. I'm done. I am just so done with this episode. I need to go. I need to watch something else right now because I just feel so unclean from what I just witnessed. Thanks for watching and have a nice day. God, just fuck this show! It still feels like yesterday that I was making a video about the anniversary of Doug Walker's stupid show, and got blacklisted by his fans over it. By far the most common defense that I've gotten for that, and the show as a whole, is that the Nostalgia Critic is a comedy, and that everything it does should be taken as a joke. No, Doug Walker does not get that excuse. Whether it's getting information wrong while acting misogynistic like in Sailor Moon, talking down to people who've been pointing out legitimate problems in his later videos like in Christmas with the Cranks, capitalizing on fan requests to distract people from the Change the Channel situation like the Emoji Movie, Boss Baby, and Angry Bird, or cashing in on a popular movie currently in theaters in a cheap scumbag move to gain views, while distracting people from the Change the Channel situation like the shit show we're gonna talk about today. No, you cannot say that comedy is subjective and just use that as a crutch to defend Doug Walker from criticism. If everything that Doug Walker does as the Nostalgia Critic is just a joke, then this one is a clip of him deliberately using the N-word for the sake of a cheap gag.
What's up, my niggas?
If that's supposed to be a joke, then we all owe PewDiePie an apology. As far as I can tell, there's at least 2 ways that you can look at a modern Nostalgia Critic episode. And whichever perspective you use, it pretty much proves to be a waste of time for everyone involved. Let's take his review of Deadpool 2, for example. If you're looking at this as a comedy, then it's basically 21 minutes of cringy, juvenile, unwitty nonsense. If you're looking at this as a review of the film, then it is far, far worse. A lot of people have defended Doug by saying that the Nostalgia Critic shouldn't be taken seriously because he's an exaggerated character. They say he's a satirical take on angry, negative, nitpicky reviewers, and that he's supposed to be a pathetic man-child. And that he's supposed to have a forced, screeching, ear-raping voice, and that you're wrong for pointing out how he's a horrible piece of entertainment. But in almost every other video he puts out, he goes on and on and on about how he wants what he's saying to be taken seriously. The only exceptions are, what? The episodes where he focuses on shitty jokes, sketches, and references as opposed to actually reviewing the movie? And if you want to defend those by saying that it's comedy, well, no, just no, they're fucking awful. And his Deadpool 2 episode is just the perfect example of what I'm talking about. We start with the usual opening when we're immediately introduced to one of the episode's biggest problems.
Yeah,
I'm Deadpool, I'm Deadpool, I'm Deadpool, I love chimichangas, I'm Deadpool.
And as you probably figured out, that means we have to put up with asshole cosplay Deadpool. That guy at every convention who thinks he's really funny because he has a Deadpool cosplay, but he's really just an annoying dick.
I'm Deadpool.
I know it's hard to notice at first glance, but the problem here is that Doug Walker is being a complete hypocrite here, taking advantage of a gimmick that he openly mocked in a previous episode. In the Green Lantern episode, he was basically doing this stupid commentary on Deadpool cosplayers. I guess because Ryan Reynolds was the main character in that movie. He talks about how they think they're all cool and whatnot, basically saying that just because you're dressed as Deadpool doesn't mean that you can be intentionally annoying. And wouldn't you know it, he ends up trying to emulate that in the episode. Throughout the review, he's having this actor imitating Deadpool's gimmick, trying to use it to his advantage. He tries to write a whole bunch of fourth wall breaking and self-awareness jokes as if it automatically makes them funny. And each and every one just falls flat on its face. I know when it comes to these clipless episodes, they have to resort to using cheap costumes and copying scenes from the movie. I mean, they can't use footage from the movie because it's currently in theaters, despite that Suicide Squad was out on Blu-ray and DVD when that episode came out, so there was literally no point in making that a clipless episode. But it's done in the most obnoxious and pretentious ways. The self-mockery and self-awareness jokes are just a single gimmick that they constantly run into the ground throughout the episode. Did you think it was funny the first time? No? Well, get used to it because there's about 27 more of these damn things. I know that it's a parody of Deadpool, but the reason that it works in the Deadpool movies and not these shitty sketches is because the self-awareness and self-mockery jokes are exclusive to Deadpool himself. In the movies, he's the only one who ever uses this type of humor, and it's organic to his character because of his personality and background. But here, every single character other than Deadpool is using them, so they don't even feel unique. They're not creative enough because every single character is just exploiting the gimmick at every single opportunity. Also, the Deadpool movies knew that the fourth wall breaking jokes are irregular in superhero movies. It's more scarce in the genre, and they're not always trying to directly address the audience with them. It draws less outside attention to their universe, allowing them to be more creative in their execution. We've seen fourth wall breaking jokes plenty of times in the Nostalgia Critic before, so it's really not anything new despite that the episode is treating it like a huge step for the series. And because the fourth wall breaking jokes here resort to addressing the audience directly, they come across as completely obvious and just too awkward to watch. And like I said, it's highly hypocritical. This is the second time that Doug has called out Deadpool cosplayers for being annoying, but the entire episode is like this. It's cashing in on the idea of doing stuff that Deadpool would do because they think it'll make them look cool and comedic. He's trying way too hard to make this work, and the tone is incredibly narcissistic. He actually thinks that by copying Deadpool's shtick for this episode that it makes it entertaining. It doesn't. It just shows him desperately trying to gain brownie points by imitating a nerdy gimmick, and poorly at that.
Holy shit! Deadpool! Like the actual Deadpool!
That's right. As close as our budget will allow.
Oh. How close?
Decent costume, clever writing, good-looking guy underneath.
Oh, okay. You know, Honest Trailer's got Ryan Reynolds.
Oh, wow, you're right. Well, why don't you use your clout with the crossover you did with them to get Reynolds?
Well,
I mean, the Deadpool Honest Trailer got over 20 million views. The one you did with them got, wow, almost 3.
I see your point.
I mean, with a connection that close, you surely must be able to work your charm and magic.
You have no idea the connections I have!
So let's get this podcast with sketches started. I assume you want to talk about my impact on R-rated comic book movies, box office growth, and groundbreaking fourth wall humor in the same sentence. Well...
And this is why I don't regret saying anything that I said in my review of Doug's Norma the North episode. These drawn-out sketches are without question the absolute worst thing that was added to the series. Aside from being painfully unfunny, they're just grinding the pacing of the episode to an exhaustingly slow level. When you go to an episode of the Nostalgia Critic, you expect him to review a movie, right? But instead, they have to spend 3 minutes on this stupid opening sketch. Despite being only 3 minutes long, it feels so much longer because of how blatant and repetitive the humor is. What exactly was the novelty of these fucking things in the first place? I seriously want to know. Why did any single one of Doug Walker's fans ever find these charming or endearing or creative or witty? Because after 5 years of these stupid things, I'm completely sick of it. Everything about Doug's stupid sketches is a desperate plea for attention. Everyone is just dressed up in a cheap Halloween getup that doesn't even look remotely convincing. I've seen cosplayers from grade school who have put more effort into their costumes. They don't do anything with them except obnoxiously imitate scenes from the movie while irritatingly pointing out tropes and cliches, and their use of green screen doesn't even come close to looking integrated. In scenes where they have to run, it's painfully obvious that they're just running in place. The visual appeal is completely ugly with poorly drawn backgrounds and amateur special effects. Aside from that, nobody looks like they're blending into the background properly. All of the actors just look like they've been poorly photoshopped onto a screen cap or a picture. People have been saying that they're supposed to be intentionally crappy looking, which is an absolutely poor defense. This might have been justifiable back in the day when it was just him and a few of his buddies, where his resources were far more scarce and limited. But this is an episode from 2018, an era where they're receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars simply by having people visiting their website. And that's not including all the ad revenue they make off of their YouTube channel. And furthermore, this is an episode that aired after that scummy Indiegogo campaign where they asked their fans for $50,000 to upgrade their equipment. They gave them $90,000 and it still looks like it has the budget of a Nickelodeon sitcom. I don't care if they're supposed to be intentionally bad or whatever. If anything, they just emphasize how cheap and lazy the production of these newer episodes are.
Not so fast, dumb devil. You're the Lion King. Everybody's Kimba the White Lion.
Hey, where did Quantum Leap come from? Isn't he supposed to be white?
Apparently I wasn't PC enough, so I got a black Morty from another dimension.
I'm the woke version.
You're as woke as his style of comedy.
What the hell are you doing in my review?
You think you're this big groundbreaker and you're not. There's other R-rated comic book hits, other R-rated comedy hits, and literally hundreds of fourth wall breakers before you. You're the Kanye West of gimmicks pretending not to be gimmicks.
Ooh, a Kanye joke. It's about time someone was brave enough to make fun of him.
And here's another running problem throughout the episode. The Deadpool Rick and Morty comparison argument. They try to commentate on this topic with more crappy jokes, and it ends up just becoming another gimmick that they painfully drag into the ground throughout the episode. Aside from that, this argument doesn't even make any sense. Even as someone who's only seen a couple of episodes of Rick and Morty, it's completely ludicrous that Doug actually believes that the two are comparable. There's a bunch of differences between the personalities of Deadpool and Rick, and the two characters use very different styles of humor. Rick is a nihilistic, unfeeling sociopath who tends to be envious and full of callous. His humor comes from his counter-arguments against the other characters and how he breaks down the insignificance of the world around him. While he is an anti-hero, he's not the same kind of anti-hero as Deadpool. He's a genius with a high intellect, but he's also a jerk who takes advantage of others, preferring to be teamed up with someone less smart than himself to feel superior. What helps to make Rick sympathetic is that he does recognize his problems, and he does find satisfaction in spending time with his family. Rick's main strength as a character is how he's used as an honest exploration of nihilism and existentialism, caring mostly for himself but still finding value in spending time with Morty. As for Deadpool, his humor comes from his cynical egotism and snarky attitude, constantly mocking the medium he inhabits. He takes almost nothing seriously, embracing how hyper-aware he is of himself. His awareness of his status as a superhero allows his pop culture references to be more fitting and grounded into his atmosphere. And he doesn't exactly acknowledge himself as a hero, fighting instead for the excitement and vengeance that comes with it. He's also much more morally gray and a lot more selfless than Rick. While he can be a stuck-up jerk and express lack of empathy in his acts of killing, he does acknowledge the importance of camaraderie, and he can think to fight for someone other than himself. There's also a fundamental bit of tragedy mixed into his character. He was dying of cancer, and the only cure for it was going through a bunch of torturous experiments that disfigured his skin. Since then, he's constantly experienced the negative side of his powers. He feels the pain he endures, and the trauma is shown to have strong effects on him. Despite having godlike healing powers and the ability to survive virtually anything, that can't be a pleasant experience. He uses his fourth wall breaks and self-awareness jokes as well as breaking the rules of reality to cope with his situation. The tragedy of his character was explored much more earnestly in the sequel, particularly during the Take On Me scene. It expresses how Deadpool isn't primarily a comedic character. He can also be a very emotional character with relatable and humble struggles, and how he uses his snarky personality to stay motivated. If Doug is choosing to use the movie version for this comparison, then this version of Deadpool is nothing like Rick. It's made very clear that Doug thinks Deadpool and Rick and Morty are comparable specifically because of how they're both R-rated comedies with fourth wall breaks. And that's not just my assumption, he literally announces it.
You think you're this big groundbreaker and you're not. There's other R-rated comic book hits, other R-rated comedy hits, and literally hundreds of fourth wall breakers before you. You're the Kanye West of gimmicks pretending not to be gimmicks.
Ooh, a Kanye joke.
And by assuming that Deadpool and Rick and Morty are comparable simply because they both happen to be adult comedies with fourth wall breaks, Doug is demonstrating how he's completely misunderstanding both properties. Because of how faulty the subject is, it comes across as a straw man argument. It's a complete waste of time, and it doesn't even add anything to the analytical parts of the episode. How few there are. There isn't even much of a need for it. The argument of Deadpool not being original isn't a new argument. There were people discussing how Deadpool is unique amongst other fourth wall breakers years before this episode of NC came out. It wouldn't be so bad except that Doug is acting like he's the first person to be asking this question. Like it's this unsolved mystery that no one else has worked on providing an answer to. They don't even make this part of the episode funny. The jokes they go for involve Rick mocking Deadpool for not being the first fourth wall breaking character and how his positive reception is undeserved for it. It all just amounts to Deadpool isn't original and really nothing else. The joke is just too one-dimensional to come across as funny. And it just keeps going and going and going until you completely lose interest to the point where you just skip to the end of the episode. There's simply no appeal to it. The acting just reeks of cringe, the voice acting is irritatingly bland. It's just Doug and some guys associated with Doug attempting to play characters from other works, which just comes across as lazy filler to make up for Doug's inability to write original and interesting characters of his own. Another long-time problem with these shitty sketches. And just when you think it can't possibly get any cringier, they resort to using those damn Rick and Morty memes that have just gotten old at this point. They don't do anything satirical or creative with it, they just say the meme.
To be fair, you have to have a high IQ to understand Rick and
And to think that he went on to mock John Cena a few weeks later. You see what I mean when I say that he's a hypocrite? This entire opening and many moments throughout the episode are just lame compilations of Deadpool versus Rick and Morty jokes, and talks about how Deadpool isn't original or unique. It completely overstays its welcome in this opening sketch alone, which makes all the times preceding it more and more painful to endure. It relies far too much on this one gimmick and it simply gets tiring.
Actually, why are you doing a review on him, critic?
I admit, that's a good question. People have clearly moved on to complaining about Solo.
Oh, of course people have moved on to complain about Solo, because you know, it was such a box office hit.
It opens with Deadpool as an assassin for hire who...
Whoa, really blowing the budget on this one, aren't you?
What? It's a decent-looking city.
Yeah, I'm clearly on top of a building. All one of 3 dimensions are clearly being explored here.
Look, buddy.
I wonder how far this ball can go. What do you think? 4, 5 rooftops I can bounce it off of? Oh no! An invisible force field impenetrable to Bad King.
You have 2 years to make your movies. We have 2 weeks!
Yeah, if I could quote Spoonie from his Tekken movie review, just because you acknowledge your effects are cheap and amateur doesn't change the fact that your effects are cheap and amateur. Alright, allow me to clarify. Self-deprecation humor can work, but it has to be done properly. The self-mockery has to have an attractive appeal to it in order to succeed. And there needs to be the notion that you're not willing to take yourself too seriously. It also has to be done scarcely, because doing it too much shows weakness in your esteem. Other things that are required are a wide range of expression, and how much you're willing to distance yourself from the joke. You have to think about how you're going to exaggerate the negative comments used on you. Do it in a way that allows the audience to better relate to you. To put it simply, there's nothing attractive about Doug's self-deprecation jokes. All he does is say we know our effects are cheap, or I know my character is a pathetic man-child, and doesn't twist it into something clever. It's not nearly expressive enough in order to be effective given how one-note the mockery is. But what really prevents it from working is that he just takes himself far too seriously. As in, he treats his garbage like it's a genuine work of art. He really believes that he just makes such breathtakingly groundbreaking and revolutionary content, despite that he's done next to nothing to improve his craft. He quit Nostalgia Critic to move on to demo reel because of his ridiculous confidence in his abilities as a filmmaker, and that ended up blowing up in his face. And in this particular episode, the self-deprecation humor is way overused. They just amount to we have no budget or this is poorly done, and you're listening to them saying that for a good chunk of the episode. It lowers the value of the comedy they're going for, and it's perceived as annoying and embarrassing. Self-deprecation humor also works depending on how high your reputation is and how much power that you have because of it. It's done to bring down your status to the level of your target audience to better relate to them. And considering everything that's happened since last April, Doug's reputation isn't exactly in its best condition. Instead of reducing his status to the level of the average human being, he's just placing himself below the average human being, making his self-mockery less relatable and amusing to watch.
Yeah, everything's going so good and we're so happy and we can think of baby names. I'm gonna die.
What?
I am totally gonna die. No girlfriend is this happy in the beginning of a movie without dying.
First of all, leave the fourth wall breaking to me, because only I seem to be able to do that.
Okay.
You see what I mean when I say that the fourth wall breaking is shit when more than one character is doing it? It works because it's exclusive to Deadpool himself given the setup and background to his character. And when you have it being done by someone else, it makes the fourth wall breaking feel bland and foamed in. I already talked about this, so let's just move on.
You killed my only love. Now I'm going to destroy you in the most horrific way possible.
And what are you going to do, Comrade Pizza Face?
To be fair, I probably could have put more thought into that.
Okay, given the mediocre way they imitate the scene, it shows how Doug completely missed the point of the truck scene. Deadpool didn't just push him in front of the truck. He hugged him and jumped in front of the truck with him. It was done to delve into Deadpool's character by showing how the loss of his love has left him broken and with nothing to live for. His plan was to die along with the gangster, but his powers keep him from dying. He becomes suicidal over the loss of Vanessa, but isn't even able to end it with his mutation bringing him back. That's part of the tragedy of Deadpool's character. He doesn't want to live anymore, but is forced to live on because of his powers. I know I'm getting into this one early, but this is probably the worst thing about the episode, especially if you haven't seen the movie. They're just making shitty jokes about the scenes they're copying while completely misrepresenting them, coming across as highly misinformative. It shows how they cared more about these shitty sketches and pushing out these shitty jokes than actually reviewing the film. If you want to make a sketch series, make a sketch series, not a review. And before you say Nostalgia Critic is just entertainment and nothing else...
Probably goes without saying that this film is just as bad as the first, but this is an analytical review series, so just saying "bite me, you clog of ginger pubic hair" probably isn't going to be enough.
And there you have it. The Nostalgia Critic is meant to be seen as an analytical series. Doug is the creator after all, so by his word, it's officially canon. So if he can take his own crap seriously, so can I.
The credits roll as they emphasize what a big deal it is that they killed off Deadpool's one and only true love from the last film.
Rick, am I a dumbass, or has that been done a lot?
Yes.
To which question?
Yes.
What are you talking about? We killed off the romantic lead. That's a big-ass deal.
Maybe 30 years ago, but especially for a comic book character, that's not particularly uncommon. You should replace those hand-job credits you're giving yourself with all the other movie sequels that did the exact same thing.
And once again, they're misrepresenting the scene they're copying. It's not just that they acknowledge that they killed the love interest, they do it in a way to show how killing Vanessa was part of the joke. They know that killing the love interest is overdone, so they make an over-the-top big deal on it to make it humorous. This literally amounts to nothing more than just rehashing the not original argument again, and more shitty Deadpool versus Rick and Morty jokes.
You know, you seem to think these movies are only made for angry, awkward, overweight 14-year-old boys, and I give it more credit than that.
Yeah, give art a chance, Rick. Critic, tell us what happens next.
So Deadpool befriends an angry, awkward, overweight 14-year-old boy and...
Really? You had to phrase it that way?
Oh, just get on with it!
Get it? Get it? It was something he said he wouldn't use to describe fans, but then immediately uses it to describe the character in the movie. Aside from this being just another poorly done self-deprecation joke, I don't find the wording offensive as much as it's just lazy. You can see the punchline coming from a mile away. The style that Doug uses just makes it too easy to predict the joke he's going for. And when comedy is predictable, it simply doesn't work.
They did terrible things to me in there, things that literally scarred me for life.
Note, we are aware this accent is terrible. Tamara's only exposure to New Zealand was an interview she saw with Peter Jackson about the Hobbit movies. We are sincerely sorry to all of New Zealand for this outrage, both the accent and the Hobbit movies.
So you can put together a half-assed apology to New Zealand for your crappy sketch, but can't make the time to apologize to all the people whose trust you broke or abused while working with Mike Mashad? I know this has nothing to do with the episode itself, but considering recent events, it just makes the joke come across in really poor taste.
Oh, I'm sorry. Have you ever seen a Marvel movie? Like, any of them?
Yeah, it's basically a bunch of dramatic moments followed by jokes.
Hey, what do we say? I'm the only fourth wall breaker, remember?
Yeah, why is that?
So you can want to be me when you sneak into these films.
Is that manipulative or genius?
Yes.
To which one?
Yes.
Wow, it's actually kind of amazing. They know that the fourth wall breaking doesn't work if someone besides Deadpool is doing it, and yet they turn it into a running theme all throughout the episode.
I'm in the film now!
What the hell is this?
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, I used my portal gun to bring in other self-aware characters to emphasize how original you are. You want to break the fourth wall? I literally break it beyond!
Do I need to go back to my first argument on why this is bullshit again? We get it. Deadpool wasn't the first fourth wall breaker. And guess what? Neither was Freakazoid. The comparison he's making here doesn't even work because Deadpool was created long before Freakazoid was. This is just another example of how the sketches just go on and on and on. They needlessly take up so much time that could be spent on breaking down the movie, and it just comes across as pointless filler.
Right the hell out of nowhere, a character from a dystopian future sees his Kentucky Fried family and journeys back in time because Russell is the one who kills them. Now in the movie, this is just Roland playing Cable, but truth be told, we don't have anyone quite as awesome as that, so we went for the next best thing.
I am Cable Boner. I take it I have to watch the show to know what this is.
He's a reoccurring character, yeah.
Oh cool, another crappy character being brought back specifically for fan service. Okay, so why is it that I don't like Devil Boner even though he's an original character created by Doug and not something from another work? Well, here's the thing. The character himself could work, except that he's being portrayed by Doug Walker, and my reasons for not liking that aren't exactly what you might think. Doug has played the Nostalgia Critic for so long that it's literally the only character that can possibly be associated with him. It's his entire trademark that he plays this screeching, immature, nitpicky movie reviewer, so taking him out of that comfort zone prevents him from fulfilling another role. Whenever you see Devil Boner, you're just seeing a watered-down clone of one of Doug's other characters. The voice acting just isn't convincing because of how impossible it is to differentiate the two. You're just hearing the Nostalgia Critic trying to sound like a metal singer or a biker gang member with a sore throat. Every time he's voicing or acting as someone besides Nostalgia Critic, you're just hearing Doug Walker putting on a crappy impression. There isn't enough enthusiasm or variety in the way he talks to fit the designs or personalities of these different characters.
Oh, God.
Sweet Jesus. I don't know, Rick. Haven't you gone far enough with the fourth wall breakers?
Not until he sees what a gimmicky hack he is.
You're the hack, you little pop culture spewing pimp.
Oh, for fuck's sake. Now he's just forcing it onto us. He didn't even do anything to interfere with the scene. He just makes a comment after Kermit gets ripped off. Constantly bringing up the topic of Deadpool versus Rick and Morty doesn't make it interesting commentary. It just makes it look pretentious.
Domino also survived using her luck, and they head off to save Russell in an exciting car chase.
Wait a minute, a car chase?
Yeah.
With this review's budget, you're gonna do a car chase?
Well, attempt to.
Screw it. If we're gonna do a car chase with no money, we're gonna do it my way.
A car chase with no money? Wow, considering that no one is willing to be your sponsor anymore, that's kind of sad in hindsight.
So Cable decides to join the team to see if they can talk Russell out of his evil ways.
In Soviet Russia, fourth wall breaks you.
You ever stop to think at this point that Doug Walker's entire career as the Nostalgia Critic is just one big midlife crisis? Because it's the only way that I can legitimately feel sorry for him at this point.
X-Force kills the shit out of the scientists that torture the young mutants right before teaching a young mutant that it's wrong to kill the scientists.
They didn't kill the scientists, they killed the guards.
Russell, I know you think revenge will make you feel better, especially because I've gotten revenge on like 1 million people, and by God, it felt great.
What is the moral of this movie again?
No idea.
The moral was admittedly done with some sarcasm given its comedic edge, but the message about moving on from tragedy and finding purpose was still there. And it was clearly shown to you during the Take On Me scene. It was the scene that showed where the movie's true strength lied. It expanded upon the part of Deadpool's character that people unfamiliar with the comics wouldn't know about. How he's a sad clown struggling to do the right things. Even knowing he obviously wasn't going to die, the way it was executed was very effective. Like a calm and comforting moment giving the audience a break from all the chaos.
But killing him won't fix anything. It'll just turn you into a supervillain. A supervillain with the name Russell. And that's just uncomfortably weird.
He did have a name besides Russell, you know. He called himself Fire Fist.
And let's go start X-Force. You in, Cable?
Well, I did dedicate my life to saving my family.
But they seem to be okay now.
That's true, and I suppose nothing bad can happen to him in an apocalyptic future. Sure, why not?
Cable chose to stay behind because he wanted to look for a way to prevent the apocalyptic future from happening in the first place. He doesn't just leave them to struggle in a dystopian setting because he's going to try and stop it.
So it turns out this was family fiction. But Deadpool ends the film by stealing Cable's time-traveling device and saving Vanessa in the past.
You saved me, stopping everything from happening, including X-Force.
Did I, though? Did I?
I don't know. Did you?
No, he did not stop everything from happening. The only thing that was retconned was Vanessa's death. As we see in the mid-credit scene, the events of the X-Force being summoned to pursue Fire Fist still happened. And they still end up dying except for Peter, who Deadpool saves. Which would mean that everything else that happened still ended up happening. They still experience all that stuff, and even if Deadpool already knows what's gonna happen, he still has the memories of everything he went through, so the character development is still intact. That's like 4, possibly 5 times in a row they misrepresented scenes from the movie for the sake of a stupid joke. I don't know whether if Doug is just being ignorant, or if he didn't pay attention to the movie, or if he simply has the memory of a goldfish, but for him to call this a review of Deadpool 2 when he's misrepresenting events from the film this much, it kind of makes all of those upvotes a little bit more painful to look at.
You know I've had it up to here, Dr. Fine!
Doesn't matter how big you are, you're still Family Guy in a Spider-Man costume!
Comparing Deadpool to Family Guy is an insult, good sir! You know what, the episode is almost over, let's just get to the end of it. So we have our obligatory summary at the end, which I guess is supposed to be the part where Doug justifies this being a review, despite that this was just a bunch of shitty Deadpool versus Rick and Morty jokes. And even with this crappy summary at the end, it still doesn't feel like a review because so much was left out. Doug doesn't delve nearly enough into the story and the characters, and even what we ended up getting isn't even something that can be considered a review. The whole thing is just a beat by beat of the scenes, and even then they were more about Rick and Morty comparisons than actually looking at the film or Deadpool as a character. They skipped over so many important scenes because they probably couldn't think of a joke to represent them. Not that the jokes that they ended up giving were funny either, but that's beside the point. Doug didn't touch upon how Deadpool was suicidal over the loss of Vanessa, or how he learned how to cope with the loss and found a new family in the X-Force, or his denial of caring about Russell adding conflict to the situation. He didn't even touch upon how Deadpool isn't just about the jokes, not delving into the tragic side of the character as the movie did. Even that brief touching upon the movie's tone shift felt half-assed. This ending summary just feels too rushed, and the insight that he gives is too surface level. And it finally ends with more obvious self-deprecation jokes, along with a few lines of dialogue that I simply found to be rich with irony.
You know, you guys are funny in media, but you're assholes in real life! Just because a funny jerk on TV can get away with it doesn't mean you can get away with it.
And to think that I was willing to give you a chance to clean up your act. You sad little coward.
Hi. You might have noticed at the end of Deadpool 2 there was no after-credit sequence, wasting the time of millions of pissed-off fans.
Hey, guys, the episode is over. You can just skip over to the charity shout-out.
So, this one's for you.
This isn't that good.
Yeah, shawarma kind of sucks.
Yeah.
Was this supposed to be the lunch that cost $3,500 if you supported that shitty Indiegogo campaign? Well, at least it wasn't my money that was wasted.
Okay, just starting us off in the middle of things. I guess a lot of stories do that. Let's see what it adds.
You must be the very worst wolf I've ever seen.
A weak-ass fake-out we all saw coming. Anything else?
Wolves don't hide in trees.
I just picked the wrong tree.
It was a dead tree.
I'm gonna take this talk about trees as no, there is nothing else. So why do we have this generic intro? The opening to both the book and the animated film are simple, straightforward, and reveal a lot of character. Within the first few moments, we know Mowgli is an abandoned baby, a predator has the chance to kill him but doesn't, creates a connection showing love and care, and shows clearly that this is unusual and even risky, yet they still take that chance on this connection. But hell with that nonsense, we have the opening to U.S. Marshals! Yeah, remember that sequel to The Fugitive you don't remember? They start off with a bland action sequence with the main character that doesn't tie into the rest of the movie.
Doesn't tie into the rest of the movie? This opening chase is meant to show how the animals have been pushing Mowgli to be more of a wolf than a man, which he needed to be in order to survive out in the jungle for this long. This chase also contributes to one of the main elements of the final battle, where Mowgli shows how he gained experience and knowledge of recognizing the right trees to use, so he doesn't jump on or climb onto a weak branch which would have killed him. Lastly, it's mirrored during the epilogue, which is meant to show how much Mowgli has grown through the events of the film. It might seem insignificant at face value, but after you take more time to think about it, you realize that it makes 3 major contributions to the development of the plot. Comparing this opening chase scene to the openings of the animated versions doesn't work because it still makes sense in its own self-contained environment. It also just feels unnecessary. The people who made this movie had to have known that there were people who already saw the animated versions. They knew that going through all of this introducing Mowgli into his family and the jungle as his home stuff again would have been redundant because we already got that somewhere else. Perhaps that's not the case if you've never seen the animated versions, but in that case it still wouldn't matter because the live-action remake is still avoiding doing the same thing that the animated ones did. It was basically doing this to avoid origin fatigue.
By the way, see if you can tell which lines are from one of the greatest literary minds who ever lived, and which ones are Disney writers trying to make their 5-year-old laugh.
The law runneth over and back. For the strength of the pack is the wolf, and the strength of the wolf is the pack.
There's a rock. That's my rock. That's my rock. Nobody touches my rock. There's another rock.
The wolf that keeps it may prosper, but the wolf that breaks it will die.
Weird. That's weird.
Pretty hard to tell, right?
This dialogue argument was something I was going to let slide at first, but after giving it some thought, this is also a very exaggerated criticism. And it also feels irritating that he's treating what's actually a nitpick as if it was a major problem with the movie. That part where the mice say weird a few times is meant to show how Mowgli's inventions are out of place in the jungle, and don't belong in the presence of the animals. The argument that Doug seems to make is the shift in the tone of the dialogue, but there's a couple of ways to explain it. Mowgli is speaking the wisdom that he learned from living in the wolf pack. They made his dialogue fitting and true to the setup of his character, so it's not a detriment to how the lines are delivered. And the animals who are completely irrelevant background characters are the ones who say the more lighthearted stuff, which can easily be ignored. He also uses this as an excuse to compare the live-action one to the animated ones again. Now, it's true that the two animated versions were wise to keep a consistent tone separate from each other, but Doug is using this to say that the live-action remake doesn't have a consistent tone. The problem with this argument is that the movie does have a tone that stays reasonably consistent, knowing how to time the serious stuff and the lighthearted stuff properly.
A man cub becomes man, and man is forbidden!
This Shere Khan is odd.
The Shere Khan in this version still fits into the setting. His primal fear of man is still present, and he fears what Mowgli can become if he's allowed to live. Even if Mowgli did go to the village, what would stop him from coming back years later as a hunter? The other animals might know that Mowgli is better than this, but Shere Khan doesn't because of his prejudice. This was also something that was established in the animated Disney version.
What's he got against the kid?
He hates man with a vengeance, you know that. Because he fears man's gun and man's fire.
But little Mowgli don't have those things.
Shere Khan won't wait until he does.
In the original story, he's a screaming, bloodthirsty thug, but still follow the laws of the jungle. In the anime one, he's calm and sophisticated, but does whatever he wants for the thrill of it. Here, they try to combine the two, and it just doesn't add up.
I don't see how this Khan is supposed to be a combination of the two animated ones, since neither of their character traits are very present in him. He doesn't have either of their charisma, and he's far more straightforward with how menacing he is.
He has an elegant vocabulary, but he's always dirty and covered in mud. Imagine if the anime one looked like that. He'd look ridiculous.
You're trying my patience.
The filth and dirt implies how he's a ruthless fighter who enjoys the brutality of his hunts. Again, it fits with this version because he's not trying to be charismatic. He's being straightforward in how ruthless he is.
No matter where you go, or what they may call you, you will always be my son.
Feel free to return to share our incredible moments, like hearing Bagheera talk about our incredible moments.
Mowgli and the wolves do have a strong relationship in this version. It was simple, but it also had enough detail to not be hollow and absent-minded. When Mowgli says he's leaving, there's a more urgent sense of drama. There's a back and forth on him going, and the mother shows emotion towards the decision. You can see that Mowgli and his adopted mother are very close based on how they talk during the opening, and how they lock heads during his departure. The same can also be said about his brother Gray. We get to see some of them interacting in the beginning, and we get to see how Mowgli's departure affects him. You don't need a whole bunch of scenes of Mowgli interacting with the wolves because the relationship is conveyed through body language and personal conversation.
Shere Khan separates them, though, as Mowgli tries hiding among the wildebeest stampede.
Those are water buffaloes, not wildebeests. Considering that he got this information wrong to make that Lion King reference, it just makes the joke feel more obvious and flat.
Mowgli gets away, though, which should make Shere Khan happy, seeing how he's finally out of the jungle.
Just because Khan didn't see Mowgli at the end of the stampede doesn't mean that he was out of the jungle. He could still be in it for all he knows. And guess what? He was right. Mowgli did spend the rest of the majority of the movie in the jungle.
Now, this might sound like a dumb question at first, but really think about it. Like, actually think it over. Why does Shere Khan want Mowgli?
Because of his primal fear of man, which is something that you should have picked up by now. Even if he's not as interesting as the animated counterparts, they still got that aspect of his character right. Khan didn't want to risk Mowgli growing stronger and becoming more of a tactician in a potential fight against him. And we see how he's capable of building sharp-ended weapons that he could use to fight off Khan. He obviously can't do anything against a whole village of people who have gathered to build firm structure and weapons that can easily overwhelm him, but when he hears of a single one being in his domain, he's compelled to destroy it.
In the animated one is for the thrill of the hunt. He loves the challenge and smiles whenever he even hears the mention of man.
The animated Disney one didn't hunt Mowgli just for the thrill of the chase. He too hated man with a vengeance. If he only did it for the thrill of the hunt, it would have made him look like a psychotic serial killer. And that clearly wasn't the way that his character was being established.
If he can do whatever he wants, like in the animated one, why didn't he just get Mowgli at the watering hole?
Because he can't just do whatever he wants. The whole Day of Peace thing was clearly spelled out for you. He had to respect the law of the water truce, a time when hunting was forbidden. This is what enrages Khan further because Mowgli is being protected by a truce he can't do anything about. It also upsets him that the man being forbidden rule was being excused for Mowgli's sake. And despite that, he still chose to not attack Mowgli at the watering hole while the truce was active. He waited until the rain season came, in which Peace Rock would be covered and the truce would have ended. He didn't kill Mowgli or Akela or anyone else at the Peace Rock because he knew that it was forbidden to fight there. This is meant to show that Khan, in his own fucked up way, cares about the laws of the jungle to an extent.
If he follows the rules like in the book, he just threw those out the window when he killed the wolf's leader.
Again, Khan didn't violate the rules of the jungle when he killed Akela. He respected the law during the watering truce when hunting was forbidden. There was no truce going on at the time that he attacked him. The rain season had come and the Peace Rock was covered.
And it doesn't matter because Mowgli's out of the jungle anyway, there's no threat.
He was clearly still in the jungle as I just went over. That's why he felt compelled to draw him out.
Either way, there's no reason for him to want this damn kid, not in character motivation or logical survival.
The way I see it, Khan thinks of Mowgli as a threat because he obtained more intricate knowledge on the jungle, and he fears that he can use that knowledge to damage the jungle later on, which makes him potentially more dangerous than any other man. In a later scene, King Louie assumed that the ability to create the red flower is something that man is just born with. Shere Khan and many of the other animals could believe the same thing, so Khan would probably think that Mowgli will make a red flower and try to destroy the jungle when he gets older.
I know they're trying to be the grown-up version.
So now comes the most repetitive argument that Doug makes in this review, because trust me, you're gonna be hearing it a couple of more times, calling the live-action remake the grown-up version. I know I'm only speaking for myself here, but I never saw anyone calling the 2016 remake the grown-up version, especially considering how the movie is rated PG. It might be darker than the animated one, but that doesn't make it an adult version. And if you think it's because of the trailers, those don't count. The trailers were made to make the film look epic, not mature. I'd say that the Chuck Jones short was a lot more adult than the live-action remake, but that's not what the live-action remake was trying to be. It was trying to be a family movie in which both adults and children can enjoy it. Because of how the movie mixes more serious stuff with a lighthearted and upbeat tone, it's capable of translating its themes to any audience member of any age. Seeing Doug constantly throwing that reputation in its face when it never had it in the first place is obnoxious. And using that mocking voice and those finger movements to mock the movie's positive reception makes it feel a little bit more tedious.
But when the adult version can't answer why and the kid version can, you're pretty much becoming DC.
Dawn of Justice didn't suck because it was the grown-up alternative to the cartoon. It sucked because it was a poorly executed mess of 20 different stories meshed together with a faulty premise. Comparing it to this movie for the singular purpose of boosting your ego is a petty low blow.
She, for no reason I can figure, tells him that Shere Khan killed his father, then tries to eat him but is knocked out by Baloo the bear. And that's it, no more Ka. Under 2 minutes of no jokes, no songs, not even really any character.
Kaa was doing more than just explaining Mowgli's backstory. She was foreshadowing the presence of the red flower, which plays a key role during the climax. It's described as a destructive, mysterious force that the animals of the jungle don't understand. It's why they're afraid of fire, and it's one of the reasons why man is supposed to be forbidden. This is a crucial plot point that Doug completely overlooks, despite that it was meant to explain to the audience about one of the reasons why Khan is afraid of Mowgli and why he would want to kill him. So despite not having as much character as the animated one, she still added something to the film.
So, which one is really better? The silly little kid version that no one remembers, or the super complex, dark and gritty grown-up version? What the hell are you people?
Alright, if Doug is gonna keep bringing this up, then I suppose I should say something about it too. The idea of something being darker, edgier, and more serious. Here's how I understand it to work. In order for the darker and more serious stuff to not come across as overbearing and annoying, there needs to be a form of compromise. If you make something dark and edgy for the sake of being dark and edgy, of course it's going to be bad. However, if you can find a way for it to have purpose and meaning in the story that you're telling while not pushing it too much, you can end up pulling off something interesting. For example, Batman the Animated Series could have been incredibly awful. It could have been a cartoon that was being dark and edgy and serious for the singular purpose of appeasing to an older audience. But the writing came across as balanced and relatable, and it wasn't just dark and edgy. It was also silly, goofy, straightforward, adventurous, charming, all mixed with a sense of humanity. These were things that both adults and children could relate to, which would explain why many adults who grew up in the 90s still find Batman the Animated Series as a fantastic show. And that's what the live-action remake of The Jungle Book is. It too was darker and more serious, but it was also silly, goofy, straightforward, adventurous, and charming. The way that Doug constantly mocks it by calling it the adult version or the grown-up version quickly becomes a straw man argument. It feels like an ongoing argument in the YouTube comment section, and he's really reaching out to things to complain about in order to prove his faulty points.
I have to go to the man village.
So Mowgli decides to head to the man village. Yeah, I guess he's okay with going there again.
When Mowgli says he has to go to the village, he says it with a tone that shows how he feels like it's being forced on him. Bagheera was constantly telling him that he needed to go, despite that he didn't want to.
You can always tell by the red flower.
The red flower doesn't seem so bad.
Yeah. Let it loose, and it destroys everything it touches.
Kinda weird how he calls fire the red flower, but a moment earlier he used the word propaganda.
He calls it the red flower because he, like every other animal, doesn't know anything about it. All he knows is how it's a destructive force that spreads fast. He's more familiar with the wolves because he lives in the same space as them, and their lifestyle strongly contrasts with his own. That's why he jokingly refers to their speech as propaganda. And furthermore, why would you expect any of the animals to refer to fire as fire in this version? It's made very clear that no one in the jungle knows the actual term. The idea of fire being a mysterious force to the inhabitants of the jungle is captured during Mowgli sneaking into the village near the climax. We see it from his point of view as this vibrant red aura that looks majestic and beautiful, but can also be destructive if handled poorly.
He even finds an elephant trapped in a hole and uses his ingenuity to get him out. It's actually a very nice scene. But it's botched when Bagheera finds them both and tries to take Mowgli back to the man village.
The meaning behind the scene doesn't get botched. Bagheera in his heart acknowledges that a part of Mowgli should stay in the jungle. It's just that with Khan on the loose, he has to be taken somewhere else because it's the only way to ensure that he doesn't end up getting killed.
Do I have to spell this out? I don't want you around anymore.
Okay, look, this scene in the anime one is kinda lame too, because Mowgli's just being a brat. But Baloo still tells him the truth.
But telling Mowgli the truth wouldn't have changed anything, or make him stay away from Khan for that matter. Bagheera tried changing Mowgli's mind earlier, and that didn't work either. Mowgli still wanted to stay in the jungle, even with Bagheera warning him about Khan. If Baloo told Mowgli that he should just live in the village, he would argue and stubbornly stay anyway. Also, if he does tell the truth and tell Mowgli that his wolf father was killed, it would make Mowgli go back to Khan in revenge, which would end up doing exactly what Khan wants. It might result in the cliché rift for the third act, but it still makes sense in the context of the situation. Driving him away was the only reasonable thing he could think of to make Mowgli think of going to the village.
In this version, Baloo convinces him to stay in the jungle. Mowgli was actually gonna go to the man village even without Bagheera.
There was no guarantee that Mowgli was gonna go to the village because of how much more fun he was having living with Baloo. He specifically said that he didn't want to leave because he felt better living there. This is something that he says after that pep talk by the village. You also need to consider Mowgli's main motivation. He wanted to leave the wolf pack because he thought it would keep them safe from Khan. Mowgli never wanted to go to the man village at all. He always saw going to the village as a minor alternative to going somewhere else. There's a scene earlier on where he suggests living with a different herd of animals where he thinks he can hide from Khan. Once Mowgli feels he can just live with Baloo, an alternative is presented to him and he would no longer feel a desire to go to the man village.
The book didn't need him lying, the anime one didn't need him lying, but this one does because it's the grown-up version.
Good God, man, do we really need to go into the whole grown-up thing again?
How did it get this again?
Okay, anyone with half a brain can tell at this point that Rotten Tomatoes is a horrible, irrelevant website, and shame on you for using it as a reliable source of information, twice.
But before getting him out, Louis reveals that the leader of the wolves is dead.
Shere Khan killed him.
Again, Bagheera could have relayed that information.
Had Bagheera relayed that information to Mowgli, it would have made him run recklessly to his death. Which, guess what, is exactly what ends up happening. Bagheera was put in charge of looking after Mowgli specifically to not let that happen.
But we have to pretend this pointless scene wasn't a pointless scene because, again, grown-up version.
Come on, man, it's not even funny anymore. Did you seriously just assume that because it's a live-action remake?
Finding this out, Mowgli sneaks into the man village to grab the red flower to fight off Shere Khan. A few drops of it fall, and I can see where the phrase spread like wildfire comes from because shit! The whole jungle's on fire in seconds! Okay, this would literally have to go from this to this in a matter of a few minutes. Even wildfire doesn't spread like wildfire!
Yeah, I watched Bambi a while back, and the fire in that movie spread pretty fast too. This would be okay as a nitpick, but he's treating it like a plot hole considering that he brings it up a few more times during the climax. Wildfire can actually spread pretty damn fast, and if he doesn't believe that, he's clearly never heard of Arizona.
So the animals are now afraid of Mowgli for starting the fire, even his family, but he throws out the fire, which is the stupidest thing he could have done.
That was the stupidest thing you could have done.
Right? You destroyed their home! You might as well use it for its original intent!
Mowgli was proving to Khan and all of the other animals that he wasn't the kind of man that he was afraid of. Sure, he gets the fire at the beginning, but that's after he found out that his family was in danger. He was desperate and needed something he thought he could use to protect them from Khan. That was just the pressuring situation he was placed in, especially since he was left more angry by Baloo and Bagheera not being honest with him. When Mowgli was given the chance to use the fire to hurt Khan instead of protect his wolf pack, he gets rid of it.
But the animals stand behind Mowgli to say, thanks for burning everything down, and why the hell didn't we rise up to fight this jackass days earlier?
The wolves weren't strong enough to take on Khan by themselves, something that was actually shown during the final battle.
In just about every version, he goes back to the man village because they build up, that's where he belongs, but this one doesn't do that. Why? No goddamn clue!
I do prefer the ending of the animated versions, but I can actually see what they were going for here. They wanted to give the ending a more modern take, and things that happen in this version actually support that take. It's an allegory for nurture over nature. The Jungle Book at its core is still about a human boy who was raised and loved by animals, and the bond between him and the wolves is made out to be stronger than in the animated Disney one. Instead of the message being you have to be with your own kind, it was turned into live where you feel like you belong. So it's not really a surprise that this movie would take a different direction and stay true to what it was doing.
Guys, I don't get this.
Considering your history with Disney movies, I never expected you to.
The original story is aggressive, dark, and full of great tropes. The animated film is cute, charming, and full of unforgettable characters. This tries to combine them without realizing what made them work on their own.
Or maybe it was doing its own spin on the story. The new ending they went with kind of implements that. Just because it was acknowledging things that happened in the animated versions doesn't mean it was trying to be a combination of the two.
Are you gonna remember any of these characters more than the animated one? Probably not. Are you gonna remember the language or lessons as much as the book? Whether it's a delightful little kids movie you'll return to more and more, or an epic coming-of-age story you'll return to more and more, this one will most likely be looked at less and less.
Didn't you say in your It review that even though the new one was better, the original was more memorable because of its familiar feel? Of course people will remember the animated one more because it's just the version that they grew up with. Why does that automatically make the remake badly written? You literally said the animated Disney one is more memorable than the live-action one, meaning that the live-action one must be bad as a result. But that shouldn't be used as a definitive reason as to why. You are literally going back on a lesson you taught your audience in the past for the sake of your own self-entitled outlook on this movie. It feels like Doug is deliberately contradicting himself just to get his thoughts on this movie across. It's incredibly contradictory, and combined with all of the other fundamental problems with this review, it results in a complete mess of an analysis.
I want Disney to do an authentic version of this book. I want it so authentic that the author's name is above the title.
The Jungle Book.
Not directed by the idiot who directed the Mummy movie.
But it's in live action, Doug. That must mean it's the real grown-up You know what? Fuck this show.